Hi there, it's Ron and Cyndi Gula with another episode of the Gula Tech Cyber Fiction Show. Cyndi, how are you?
I'm doing great, Ron. How are you doing?
We're doing phenomenal.
But I'm mostly excited. We have our guest, Philip Niedermair.
Philip, how are you, sir?
I'm splendid. Thank you very much. It's always an honor to be with you and Cyndi, Ron.
So, Philip, Cyndi and I have known you, I think, about 5 years or so.
A little longer I've known Cyndi, but
a little longer. Yeah. That's right. A few minutes longer. Yeah. She makes a better first impression than I do.
Especially back then.
So today we're going to talk about a number of different things. You've been involved a little bit with the Cyberspace Solarium, have great concerns about the direction of cyber for the country.
Yep.
We're going to talk about cyber training.
Yep.
We care very deeply about that. I'm sure we'll talk about data care and
so
whatnot.
Do I.
And then we're also going to talk about what I consider etiquette and professionalism when it comes to leadership. And I think today it's even needed more than in the past, especially because everybody's working from home. We've kind of lost that interpersonal, in-person thing. And I think you're one of the greats at that. But let's start off with your background.
Very kind of you.
Well, thank you. Let's start off with your background. How'd you get here? What's your background? Where do you work? What are you doing?
So born in London, raised in Scotland, Highland Scottish mother, American father. What a blessing. Came here to go to university, started my own company when I was about 22, grew it to a pretty large size, and it was a strategic consulting firm. And that was the foundation of my life, very influenced by my father and my grandfather and my mother. All played significant roles in shaping who I am today.
And speaking of influence, your grandfather had a lot of influence with the Navy, right?
The U.S. Navy.
Yes, my American grandfather was the chief naval architect of the U.S. Navy from 1938 to 58 and is credited with the basic design of over 8,000 of our ships. And some of them are still afloat. So
that's impressive. Cyndi, I think you have a good story about, sometimes if Philip asks us to come to a meeting, you really don't know, are we going to meet somebody to go to maybe a Baltimore Orioles game, or in this case, the Secretary of the Navy, right?
Yeah. So, hey, Philip asks us, hey, do you guys want to go on the Constellation with this thing I'm having? And generally, Ron and I say yes. And we get there and Philip's like, did I tell you why we're here? We're like, actually, no.
No. Well, we were actually forbidden to tell why you were invited. The Navy had asked us not to mention it. In fact, they had not told us why they were hosting the event, though Rear Admiral Scott Sanders and I were able to surmise it pretty easily because we knew that there was a new class of ship being named, and we thought that they might be naming the class of ship after the USS Constellation. A great series of ships have been named the Constellation, but no series of actual class of ships. And this new class of ship was named by Navy Secretary Kenneth Braithwaite at the end of October last year at a ceremony at the Constellation. And it was great to have you there, even though it was just like supposed to be a dozen of us and about 50 people showed up.
Yes, it was just a handful and it was amazing. I really enjoyed the presentation that you had given of your grandfather's memoirs to the Secretary of Navy on the historic ship USS Constellation that's in the Baltimore Inner Harbor.
Yeah, so his memoirs were recorded, ironically enough, one of the summers I spent with him. So I flew over from Scotland. We would spend the whole summer with my grandfather living under naval orders, under strict regiment of military discipline. And we would spend 2 fantastic months with him. And while we were there that particular summer of 1976, they also did the recording of his oral history for the U.S. Naval Institute, which is a book you can buy. And I had just bought a copy for myself. I'd never owned one. I'd only owned a copy my grandfather had given me. And it arrived like 2 days before I was meeting with the secretary. So Scott Sanders and I were chatting about what should we give the secretary as a gift. And I said, well, I don't want to seem egotistical, but I know he's a historian. Would it be appropriate if I gave him a copy of my grandfather's oral history? And it turned out the secretary knew a lot about my grandfather. So
that's an excellent story.
And that's just one. That's just one of the stories that we have.
Stories all day.
It was kind of you to bring that up, Cyndi.
No, but you're also involved, as we talk about your background, you're also involved in a number of nonprofits. So you serve, is it the Inner Harbor Historic? Now, what's the name?
Historic ships in Baltimore.
In Baltimore, right?
Yeah.
So you've got the submarine. which is
submarine, the
the
Torsk.
You've got the Coast Guard vessel.
Yes, we do. We don't name that because it was a very evil man.
Oh, okay. That's
Yeah.
that's interesting.
And I agree that I don't often agree with statues being unnamed, but in this case, he should never have had a ship named after him.
Yeah, that's good. I'm with you on that. I'd much
Right.
rather think of people like Zumwalt,
Of course.
who were pioneers in
Yeah.
integrating African Americans in
Exactly.
the Navy, and of course, it's an amazing boat.
And he was my grandfather was a huge Zumwalt fan.
Yeah.
And I always used to hear him talk about this man named Zumwalt, and I thought, what an odd name. And I end up that's how I got to know Scott Sanders, because Scott invited me to be on the commissioning committee of the USS Zumwalt.
Yeah, he actually presided over the commissioning ceremony for my ROTC graduation.
Oh, wow.
Which, yes, absolutely.
Whereas you would have liked to have Admiral Sanders, it was Zumwalt that really did. So
That's right.
yes,
Well,
not to be confused.
Right. And then you've also done Fleet Week in Baltimore.
Fleet Week?
So that's
Baltimore.
what kind of work goes into helping set up Fleet Week?
Oh my goodness, there's so much, and the core of it is the Sail Baltimore and historic ships, and our tremendous team, Chris Rouse, and the entire community that gathers together, the sailing and boating community. We typically have, when it under normal circumstances, about 15 ships that come in to the harbor. Several from other countries, but mainly from the United States. And the ships are open for tours, and they host several events each, typically for people that are invited to attend as
And
well.
my favorite part about Fleet Week is the aviation segment. Typically, you get your Blue Angels.
Blue Angels come zooming in.
Right.
Yeah,
That's good stuff.
it's very exciting.
And then your official day job is you're the managing director of strategic alliances for Winford, Taylor, and
Whiteford,
Preston.
Taylor Preston.
Whiteford.
Oh my goodness.
Whiteford.
Taylor
Whiteford.
Preston.
It must have been the evil autocorrect. Of course. the great law firm out of
Yeah, what an honor to be part of that firm. Almost 100 years old. We have 17 offices stretching from Tennessee to Detroit, 2 in New York and several in Maryland and in DC. And we're an end-to-end law firm. We do all types of legal work, typically in the core elements of the middle market, but we also serve global companies. And our managing partner, Marty Fletcher, I was fortunate enough to meet, and he asked me to join the firm, and I did. And I'm so happy to be there.
That's phenomenal. So a lot of what you do is helping other companies, other leaders kind of achieve their business goals, their executive goals. And I kind of want to talk about that for a bit. So you teach a course called Path Builder,
Yep.
which involves a number of different leadership things. I think it's really important for the country, not only for the next generation of entrepreneurs that, Cyndi and I like to think that we're helping along and inspiring, but not only that, just professionals in general. Coming out of COVID, we were all on Zoom for the past year.
Right.
So I think the art of
Forgotten how to tie our ties.
And to make sure we're wearing pants for,
Wearing pants in
when
the
we're
meeting.
talking with
Yes.
each other.
Absolutely. So how did you get involved with Path Builder, and what is it that you teach? Can you teach leadership?
You can inspire leadership. I think it's very hard to teach. And I think you can create a framework where people can follow, and then they can teach themselves. Teaching leadership is very hard. But how Path Builder came to be was when I came to the middle market as a strategist I'd worked all over the world for large global companies. And I'd never been implementing my own plans. I was largely implementing the plans of others. So I had good structure to my process, from working with Coca-Cola and MasterCard and companies like this on difficult programs. When I came to the middle market, for various reasons, I wanted to work more locally and travel less. I observed the market for about 2 months, and then I wrote down all of the attributes of the market. And there were several things that stuck out to me. First of all, in a geographic area, really the market is made up of several different geographic segments. So I divided those up in the Mid-Atlantic, and I saw where there were influencers there. And then I wrote down the process that I wanted to follow. And any kind of management system is built on core values. So the foundational elements, what were those core values that I wanted to share, that I wanted to wear on my lapel? That's how I always put it, so that people were clear of what I stood for. And the first, of course, is to serve others before self. And then to seek excellence in everything you do, and then to have unquestioned integrity. So if you say you're going to do something in a particular way, you should do your best to do it. And if you're not, you should tell the person why it didn't happen that way. Those were the 3 core values. And then I had some laws I lived by, and I wrote those laws down. And the first was very difficult for me to deal with, And that was the law of association and the law of emulation. Those two laws were tough because what I wanted to do was just be successful like everyone else, right? But I had no clients when I came here. I was like in my mid 40s and had no clients, but I learned to associate with people who I wanted to be like and be with and become. And then the last part of that piece was the willingness to emulate others. So I would see people who are successful. When you see some people who are successful, if we're honest about it, sometimes you get the green eye of envy, right? And you say, oh, but instead what you should do is emulate their behavior because that behavior is working and therefore you could learn from it. So there's other things, but those are the starting points for me. Obviously, I have a big passion. Murray DL over at the University of Baltimore, who's allowed me to teach this class as part of his MBA, he loves Path Builder, and he thinks it's, he says about it, well, if we'd had it at the Hay Group, the global consulting firm that he used to run with 4,000 consultants, he always says it would have been even more successful than it already was. So, yeah.
Now, it's interesting how you say emulating leaders. In today's day and age with the society and social media.
Are you going to put me on the spot here?
Oh, no. I'm just saying is like...
Which political leaders, Philip?
No. I'm not saying political. I'm just saying like Elon Musk and influencers that are online with respect to people wanting to emulate them, which might not be the greatest choice because of their view. Like their view of what they do and how they act is very controlled.
Yes.
And so then you learn things later that you might not align with. And therefore, that loyalty and disappointment with respect to possibly choosing the wrong horse, so to speak.
Yeah, but there are still great leaders who take the stand. I'm going to choose Jamie Dimon because I admire him. He's straightforward. He likes grit. And he gets his hands dirty, too, with his people. He's out there working the market. And, when you look at what he's achieved and continues to achieve at JP Morgan Chase, I think that's a tremendous role model to be able to emulate after. And certainly the speeches he gave and the presentations he gave during COVID, I watched and I tried to share access to those with my network. And a big part of my philosophy, of course, is to give myself away, give away what I have access to. And I'm very fortunate. I got a great relationship with JP Morgan. So they would I'd ping them and say, can I share this link that I've got for this upcoming small presentation? And they always say yes. And it's great when you can do that. I love that.
So you've given this class all over the country.
Yep.
And
to
even Hawaii, which is still in the country, right?
Yeah.
Right?
And I gave it to a group of Saudi Arabian engineers once as well. It was just great fun.
Think about the different demographics. Yeah. And I think about race, but I also think about sex, but I also think about technologists, maybe ex-military. What are some insights you've gotten just from that tapestry of diversity that we have out there across the country?
So that's a great question, Ron. When you think about people who are technically driven, of course, if you were to look at them. So one of the things I suggest people learn is the some of the simple assets of being able to use predictive indexing, right? So understand that there are basically 4 different personality types. There's the engineer, there's the entrepreneur, there's the team player, and there's the person who likes to work at the water cooler, a very chatty person. And they're all good. They can all get great things done. And when you understand who you're talking to, and if you're willing to adjust your style a little bit, then you can gain enormously from that. So you ask, how this technical issue? Well, you have to adapt your style. And when you're dealing with people who are very technical, you don't want to tell them the data. You want them to discover the data themselves. So it's just sort of a little adaptation that you make when you're working to be able to communicate more effectively.
And a lot of that's based on derivatives of the Myers-Briggs.
Yep.
Things.
This was DISC as it happens, but it's the same process.
Yeah. And then at Tenable, we had the, what was I always say the watered down version of Myers. People are earth, they're fire, they're water or they're air. And that was a simple oversimplification of Myers-Briggs. It was the same kind of thing. Know your audience, know how to interact with people.
And how to get the most out of people.
Right. And it's fine to adapt a little bit. I found, it used to be, before I entered the middle market, I was running my company. We had a lot of people, more than 100 employees, and did all kinds of work all over the world. And I was just me. Okay. I didn't adapt at all. And I got things done, but I was like a bulldozer rather than a team leader.
So when you start talking about leadership,
Yeah.
and how often do you have to separate, what is the goal that you're trying to achieve of being a leader? And then how do you develop those effective relationships and partnerships to get to that goal? Because I've seen some people, they're happy to meet anybody.
Yeah.
They're happy to go on anybody's podcast, anybody's show, right? Right. No. So the question is how do you teach building those relationships that are of meaning that help you, identify your goal or get you towards your goal?
So if you look at everything is sort of map and data driven, right? So in the Mid-Atlantic, first of all, in order to have influence in this marketplace, there is more than just, it's not just Columbia. It's not just Baltimore. These are islands that are interconnected by roads, but often they're islands. So first of all, you need to understand the map dynamics of where you're operating. It doesn't matter where you are in the country, this applies. And so you develop influence within those different areas. So Annapolis, Baltimore, Washington, D.C., Montgomery County, all of those different places look to have, and I refer to it in my Path Builder course as having a standard bearer relationship, so that in the local market that you're functioning in, first thing you want to do is identify who are the people that they look up to. One of my dear friends, I'll name him, is Jay Baldwin, and in Anne Arundel County, most people know who Reliable Contracting, and they're fabulous. I had the good fortune of them becoming my first client. In when I came to the middle market. Jay's still my client today. I still advise him independently from the work I do for Whiteford Taylor, though he is also a client of our law firm. And you need to adapt your style. You need to identify leaders that you teach with and help them learn too. And you identify things they need. I mean, if you I don't have something to offer, it's hard to operate into the marketplace. When I came to the middle market, I didn't start attending networking events until I had 6 clients who I was serving. Then I could go to a networking event and I could offer connections and resources that I had so that we could benefit together. And now, of course, I'm very blessed because I have you as a friend, Ron, and Cyndi, and that's only 2 people you need to know in this whole marketplace.
You're too kind. So what is a networking event? Because there's a lot of people who are listening to our show.
I hate networking events, just that we're clear.
But they imagine, like, wouldn't it be so cool to go rub shoulders with politicians and technocrats and the media? It's actually work.
It's a lot of work to do it right.
I've tried to explain this to my parents a couple of times, and even some of our younger funds. It's like, look, you can't just go into a network event and go, oh, I just happened to meet. Like, you should have an agenda.
Of course.
You should know what you're saying. It's just like thinking before you tweet something. You should think about what you say something the first time you meet somebody.
But also don't not go because you don't know, because sometimes you need to explore to figure it out. So, it is a tricky thing. I'm very uncomfortable the first time walking in the door and figuring out who and what to expect. But yeah, having a plan ahead of time is certainly
it's critical.
And how important is it in these network events when you think about leadership and inspiring others and grooming your replacement, growing your replacements, bringing them into these things? I'm always impressed.
It's vital.
A lot of the networking you do, you are always bringing like a cadet or a student, or trying to get even folks who aren't even in college yet, but they're interested in cyber, bringing them to expose them to this kind of world. So what's your whole theory on networking events?
So great question. And I had attended one networking event until I came to Baltimore many years ago. I went to a chamber event and I was running my other company, and I realized I would never want to ever go again. Then I came to the work in the middle market, and I realized that networking events were absolutely fundamental to how you develop relationships. And someone told me you need to know about 500 people in the market and then develop relationships with some of them, but have more contacts. And, so I took that and weighed it up, and I thought, bloody hell, if I go take that advice, it's going to take me 10 years to reach 500 people. That won't work for me. So I developed a process, and the process became Path Builder to a certain degree. And that was, if you're attending an event, learn who the host and the sponsors are. And who the host is really important. And I'll just give you an example of the first networking event I used Path Builder for. A guy called Craig Burris was hosting a Smart CEO dinner in a very nice restaurant, and it was $150 to buy a ticket. And so I decided I would use this process. I got to the event half an hour before it started. I asked for Craig. The person I asked for happened to be Craig. I said to Craig, I said, I'm Philip Niedermair. I've never been to your event before. In fact, this is the first event that I've ever attended in Baltimore. Actually, it was my second, but I didn't really attend the first one. I observed it. And I said to Craig, Craig, once other people arrive at this event, would you do me a big favor? And he said, yes, whatever you need. I said, would you take a moment if I come and find you and introduce me to 4 or 5 really great people? I don't care if they're the biggest, most successful people in the city, but great people who are kind. And because that's the people I like to meet. Craig did that for me. I've never forgotten it. It worked perfectly. I've done it many times since, and it works every time I do it. And John Dinkle did it for me the first time I attended his famous, when he was the editor over there at the BBJ. And so process is critical. Who's going to be there? Who's the sponsor? And then having a plan, and then meeting the right people. Having someone to sponsor you. And
even simple things like if you're going to be
you weren't expecting that answer.
Well, no, it's a great answer, but I'm also trying to talk to the folks who are listening or thinking about, I have to go to an event. I hate events. Well, it's usually because people don't, they're put on the spot and they have to introduce themselves. And this is going to sound silly and very self-reflecting. You should think about what you say in a room like that just as much as what you think about you put on your Twitter post, or your LinkedIn post, or your resume. How you introduce yourself is probably indicative of why you're there and what you want out of it. And a lot of people mess that up.
They really mess it up. And I got to tell you, I used to practice a lot because I'd never done it before. So I wanted to be really good at it. And I developed various processes for, standing up and introducing myself and so on. In fact, when I met Jonathan Claiborne with Whiteford Taylor, the first person I met with Whiteford Taylor, he took me aside and said, gosh, the way you presented yourself and introduced yourself was so great. We need a lawyer like you at our firm. As how I'm not a lawyer, but I end up at Whiteford Taylor anyway. But it was just funny.
Philip is not a lawyer, but he plays one on our show here.
And also the other side of that is when you go to these network events and you're the target.
Oh yeah.
And so speak to people about that too. I mean, if you're the sponsor or if you are a target.
Well, one of the most important things I did when I first came into the market, I would encourage other people to do it, is I created my own networking event, which I called a WeDram, right? And I used to host it regularly at the Royal Sonesta and at the Jefferson Hotel. And now I'm hosting it again, as we discussed, in virtual reality, which is just fabulous. But we'll talk about that later. But if you're at an event, there are 2 things you can do to make yourself more comfortable, no matter whether you're the target or whether you're just attending. 1, have the plan, which we just covered. And 2, invite people to attend the event with you. Now, sometimes they're expensive and you can't buy them tickets. I've been in a position where that's been the case. I couldn't buy anybody tickets at first. Now I can buy tickets, but it doesn't mean you don't invite people whether you can buy the tickets or not. Just tell them about it and say, hey, if you want to come with me, we can go to this event together. And then before you know, you got half a dozen people who are attending with you, and they'll know people in the room and they can introduce you. And that overcomes that badge nonsense. I mean, I don't even like wearing name badges. I take them off often because it bothers me. And no, not everyone should do that because they can't. But I would just say that if you're in a situation where you should give people notice, tell them about the event, make sure it's a good one. Don't bring people to the ones that aren't. Now, my old WeDrams were fabulous because they were the events about nothing. People would say, well, what's a WeDram, Phil? And I said, well, that show Seinfeld? It was a show about nothing. My events, the event about nothing, that's what makes it so good, because all we're there for is to meet good people.
So the WeDram's a good story. So you started doing your own events.
Yep.
And they were kind of Baltimore centric.
Yes, initially all Baltimore.
And you could pull a little bit of people from Washington, D.C.
A little bit, they did, yeah.
Central Maryland. But when COVID happened, you went online.
Yes.
So how many people were showing up in person, and what was that decision like to go online?
Well, I hadn't done WeDrams for several years because I got so involved with other platforms that I was supporting those platforms, but I would create my own little mini WeDram within other people's events by inviting groups of people to attend events with me. So that's how I looked at it. So I didn't stop doing WeDrams. I just transferred them to the other events mentally, right? Now, when COVID happened, as you know, we were all planning to fly to Colorado with you. right? And that was going to be great fun again, but it didn't happen. So there we were, the JSAC, the Joint Services Academy Cyber Summit, a very important event, a gathering of some of the most senior people in cybersecurity. We got big challenges. At some point in the conversation, we definitely want to get to that. And the night before the beginning of the JSAC, I had always helped the Army Cyber Institute do something. I'd done them in DC. I'd done them up in at West Point. And so I wasn't the only sponsor, but we'd always done some sort of event. And this year we couldn't do anything because it was virtual. And so instead, I spoke to Carlos Vega, a dear friend of mine from ACI, Heather McMahon, who used to be at the President's Intelligence Advisory Board, and Rear Admiral Scott Sanders. And I said, let's do a virtual event. And they kind of said to me, oh, no one will show up, blah, blah, blah. I said, I think they will. We'll call it a WeDram.
That sounded more like JC Carlos. I don't think Heather would ever have said that.
Well, I mean, they were a little skeptical that we would get a lot of people. And I said, if we call it a WeDram, everyone will come. They'll want to know what it is. And those that know what it is will definitely want to come, because in Scotland, a WeDram's a social small gathering that's intimate and kind. That's what it is. You don't have to drink alcohol necessarily to any extent. You don't
have to, but that's one of the reasons
we do it.
That's why we do
it. Right. And so it worked out really well. And now we'll be in our 59th week this week. And when we have a group of about 200 people who on a monthly basis attend a formally run but very informal gathering online. And it's like Hollywood Squares on steroids. It's Scottish style with a twist, but all American, where everyone's welcome. And it's called the National Security and Cyber WeDram. But we do talk about other things.
Yes.
Like the occasional UFO sighting.
Yes.
Which is good. So let me ask you this then. So you went from having these informal meetings to something online. Now we're recording this in June of 2021.
Yep.
COVID's over.
Yeah.
But it seems like people are asking, are you going to go to Black Hat? So how do you think things are going to swing back? Are we still going to do things virtual? Are we going to have to start buying a new set of suits? What do you think is going to happen next?
I unfortunately have to get my old suits out of the cupboard because I put 30 pounds on during COVID, which is sad. I'm working on it, right, Ron? I promise you I'm going to lose the weight. But what's going to change? So for me, people are pleased to be going back to the new normal. And it is a new normal. It isn't the old normal. There is a shift. I think from my standpoint, that when I looked at it and others I have advised, I recommended that they take a larger presence in social media. I tend to focus on less is more. So I focus my social media on LinkedIn. When I began COVID in March, the end of March, of course, as the Solarium Commission report was presented, we had that lovely dinner down at the Jefferson and the world shut down, right? I had 1,680 relationships on LinkedIn. And I had a strategy whereby I only allowed people I knew to connect with me. And then I said, well, look, I'm stuck here in the house and I can't do what I used to do. So I went into the LinkedIn and I hunted. I hunted strategically for good connections who I could provide value for and who could provide potential value for me. And I reached out to them and I began building my network. It's now at almost 15,000 people. And it's strategically located in the mid-Atlantic as a focus, but I wanted international connectivity too. So I had a pretty good network, obviously in the UK, and I have now a very large network in the UK, and I have a big network in Germany and France, smaller networks in Argentina and in Italy. And I focused on them, and I focused around technical people, cyber people, and private equity and bankers, because that's the world that I largely operate in.
All right. So before we move on from just professional relationships, I'm just going to hit you with a couple other just what I'm going to call etiquette things.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I've been in this.
Can I add one little comment?
Of course.
Sorry. I was going to say that as we return to normal, I did begin hosting smaller, remember we had the little dinner down at Platform Aerospace. Yep. We gathered people according to the laws. 6 could be at a table. We had 18 people there actually. And it worked out okay. Now we didn't do it again because I got ill. And not from that, but other things. And then things got shut down more tightly. But as we've come back, I've been hosting lunches and some little breakfasts and strategically supporting people's particular missions. So Karen Gibson got a friend of mine, got this beautiful role at the Senate, and we hosted a little lunch for her, which I invited you, but you couldn't join me. And we did that in DC, and I did it in DC purposefully because less is open there. And I wanted to give people a way to come and join me. And tomorrow I'm doing another one, which you can't make either, but we'll do one soon where you can.
So first question.
Yes.
Saying no.
Yeah.
Hey, can you come to this event on such and such day? All of these other people are going to be there. We can't go there. How do you say no?
You have to say no sometimes. And I say no much more than I say yes to being.
And I think that's what people need to hear is you can't, like, there's this.
I'm very selective.
Yeah. There's such a sense of, I don't want to miss out.
Yeah. People attend too many events.
You go to too many events. You register. Okay.
Yep.
When do you send thank you cards?
That's a great question. And, you've met my dear friend, Major General Tom Ayers, and he is a great one for sending these beautiful thank you cards with his 2 stars on it and a little note. And I do that quite a lot. I don't do it as often as I should do, but I think you should send thank you cards. I sent one 2 weeks ago to somebody, and I'm glad I did. So. But I think we should do it more often.
Yeah, this is less exciting than seeing in the Kingsman where he's telling, what's the young kid about how to do dress proper and whatnot. But what about when you're hosting an event? One of the things that you're really good at is I need to identify this person. I want to recognize this person. And sometimes you let them talk. Sometimes they talk too much and you shut them down.
Yeah.
But you should have, that's not by accident.
No,
right? You're inviting so-and-so, whether it's former general or honorable so-and-so, you want to call them out, right?
Yeah. So I would just tell you that there's nothing by accident in what I do. Everything follows a very disciplined process. And if it goes out of that plan, I'm prepared for it, but it shouldn't, to the point where I invite people to places where they have valet parking because people bitch about parking, right? So I always arrange for valet. And it's incredible how if you plan it, you can get great rates from the hotels or the restaurants. If you have, I have 20 people parking. Can you give me a discount? No one's ever said no, not once. And the fanciest hotels you can imagine, not only in this area, but in other places I've done the same thing with. So, I think it's important to have things properly staged. I like to use table tents with names so that people are sitting next to strategically the right people. The way to avoid needing that is if you have a round table where it becomes less necessary. But if you've got squared tables, you want to have the right people sitting next to each other and be able to communicate. And then in terms of speaking, so if you note, when I speak in public in those kind of events, I typically keep my comments extremely short and actually try to use my comments to get others to participate. And I think as a host, that's what you should do. I think that the less is more rule has been a golden rule for me when I learned it. I wish I'd learned it when I was 25 and not whenever I learned it, a lot later.
So last question. This is also etiquette. So you're at a networking event. You're representing company XYZ. Mm-hmm. They distribute oranges. You meet somebody who wants to buy oranges. You would like to introduce them. That's a no-brainer.
Yeah, no-brainer.
You just do the email and you're good.
I do.
What if it's indirect? It's somebody who buys bananas and they're thinking about buying oranges. You need to check on both ends and make sure if the introduction's appropriate.
You do.
Yeah.
I think it's a great example, Ron. Look, the basic element is to meet good people and find people who share your core values. And that makes life a lot easier. And then to find out what are their skill sets or their product requirements, right? That's how my brain works. Skill set, product requirement, and how can I then help them? And I'm always looking at that puzzle and trying to make it work.
That's excellent. So let's pivot a little bit to cybersecurity and in particular some of the bigger efforts that are going on. We both attended the Cyber Moonshot.
We did.
We also attended the Joint Cyber Services at the Air Force Academy. What is it? The
JSAC.
The JSAC. Well,
Joint Services Academy Cyber Summit.
Cyber Summit. That's what I was missing. But you also organized a event for the Cyberspace Solarium folks. Like right after that came out, COVID hit. Mm-hmm. And it was like the air got sucked out of the room. And I thought you put together a really nice event with the folks at Dreamport. You had Chris Inglis as a speaker. You had Suzanne Spalding. You had Admiral Mark Montgomery. So there's a lot going on. So what do you think of just where the nation is at right now with the Biden administration talking about spending $20 billion on cybersecurity, and the Cyberspace Solarium is still kind of moving forward.
First, I need to make sure that it's understood that my remarks are my own and not either my firm's or anyone else that I
He
work
plays
with.
a lawyer on TV and on show only.
And Marty will be pleased that I made that. We have a very significant cybersecurity practice at our firm, and Keith Musedale and Howard Feldman and so on, who lead that, operate in a different venue. I'm involved strategically within cyber and also focused on education and infrastructure. And my main role has been for many years, since General Hernandez asked me, to help support the Army Cyber Institute, helping with their different programs, including helping Carlos Vega stand up the original CyCon US, which was a huge honor to be able to be involved in that. And so my depth of cyber is deep. It is not technical, but it's certainly a good understanding of the strategic challenges we face. And we're facing an enemy who can shoot at us, and we can't shoot back. That's the basic parameters we're operating in. And our friend, Major General Tom Ayers, the former General Counsel of the Air Force, most recently wrote an extremely timely article in the Wall Street Journal, an opinion piece, which he expressed the need potentially for the mark, similar to 1812, when privateers were issued the mark from Congress to allow them to go out and hunt. So that's one of the issues we're facing. The other issue we're facing is infrastructure and the lack of control of our infrastructure and the failure of cooperation. And the third big piece we've got that we're missing, so we can't attack, we've only got to defend. We've got the infrastructure issue, which is terribly complex and lots being done about it, but we need more cooperation and collaboration at all levels. And then the next thing is foundationally education, right? So those are the three big bundles that you and I wrestle with. I stay up at night probably thinking about it. It's one of the few things that ever keeps me up at night. Nothing else does. I sleep like a baby most of the time. But these three issues do. And I remember when I was at the JSAC in Annapolis several years ago, and I had the privilege of sitting at Admiral Studeman's table because it was a snowstorm and there weren't that many people at it. So I got to sit with him, which was really an honor. And of course, he's considered the father of the modern intelligence system, as it were. And we were all, he had us all introduce ourselves in a very formal sort of naval way. And I was last. And it turned out that he knew my grandfather, which was just amazing. And he mentioned that as he spoke to me. And then I said, gosh, I'm working on infrastructure and I help with CyCon, sir. I would do work with the Army Cyber Institute and I do a little bit with education. And he pointed his finger at me and he said, Philip, if we don't fix education, nothing else will matter. And what we're facing from an educational front, to put it very blunt terms, is the fact we are hundreds, if not a million people short in the West. The number varies a little bit, but we're facing an onslaught as the Internet of Everything takes over our lives. And we go, because our natural tendencies as a nation is to focus on the convenience factor, which is what makes America great, right? And that's our culture, and it's fabulous. I'm not criticizing it, but that is all related to the strengths of the Internet. And from there, we are going to need more human capital to man our virtual walls and to make the systems that we function within this cyber community, because that's what this is. 98% of everything we do within 2 years will be cyber functional. We're probably at about 90% now. All the big things are cyber. And look at, obviously Colonial Pipeline jumps out now, the beef issue. But there's been many, many hundreds, if not thousands, of major attacks that have never made the media attention. And our nation, Bob Spaulding wrote the book Stealth Wars, and you're very familiar with it, so am I, and he did a great job. The Chinese are determined to dominate the world, and they have a plan. We have to defend the world from them, plus their co-conspirators.
And do we have a plan?
And we don't have a plan.
I don't think people realize how much of a struggle it is between a free and open society and closed societies.
It's a convenience factor that separates us from them. It's also convenience, as someone said down at the NSA, that will destroy us.
But it's also a priority.
It has to be a priority.
And so I don't think as a country just yet, we have shifted the priority, whereas Chinese and their plan, their 25-year plan, the priority is there. It's in schools.
It's in there.
It's already being built. And that's why I know we are, and with your help too, trying to get to the younger and younger demographic of saying, this is important. This is not somebody else's problem.
It's not.
This is all of our problem.
The first layer of what we do has to be inspiration to participate in our industry so that they have the hunger to learn. And they don't just see a barrier between them and the participation in the most exciting business in the world, because it's tremendously exciting. And you don't need to be a technical person to get involved. There are many, many jobs that are not technical.
Yeah, that's what I like to say is most of what I know about cybersecurity, I've learned by osmosis. and that's where a lot of people miss the boat. When we say cyber technologists, we don't need people who just can code. That's not all we're talking about. We're thinking the big thinkers, the architects, the
problem solvers, analysts,
ethics,
and
articulating the message to everybody, because it is a very difficult problem.
Very difficult problem. And Ron knows. So, and so do you, Cyndi.
So when you think about cyber training, did
I summarize it pretty well?
Oh, that was great.
Yeah.
You might see that clip on Instagram at some point. I think Philip was doing really well. When you think about cyber training, I think about, trying to inspire people to join this career field. And Cyndi and I talk a lot about data care. You've heard us bring up data care.
Absolutely.
Quite a bit, inspiring people to join the career, but also inspiring personal responsibility, right?
Yes.
Trying to hit that whole of society type of thing. But how, when you look at K through 12, do you think we need to teach cybersecurity? Do we need to double down on STEM, or do we need to free it up and teach more creative thinking and ethics and personal responsibility? What's your theory there?
So I think, first of all, we have to inspire participation. I think that's the fundamental. There has to be an understanding of why. Without the why, there will be no participation. And then we need to break it down into creative elements, pure problem solving, which is not about the STEM part. It's much more about being creative, having an open blackboard vision, and not having your mind controlled by an electronic device. And on the other hand, we need to ensure that the basic principles of handling that electronic device are understood by our children, because they're given this access and huge power. And then it's like they can drive a truck at 4 years old, and we don't teach them how to drive it. That's how dangerous it is. And I say that with absolute passion because it scares me. And I know that a lot of children are hurt because they aren't given the tools to understand the cyber hygiene they need to understand and to manage their engagement with this amazing tool. And that's what I want to see happen.
Yeah, both social, there's addictive natures to it.
Oh.
There's a loss of personal privacy. There's so many issues that I think we could be teaching. I mean, the school system, at least our experience has been, is they tend to focus on cyberbullying.
That's right.
Right. They don't.
Although that should be ignored, but it's a tiny thing.
Huge, big factor with suicide.
Right.
But so isn't the fact that social networking is you're really selling yourself. You're the product in that. And we don't teach those kind of things. That's the same way we don't teach that banks, yes, it's your money, but here are your benefits that you get from working with banking or how life insurance works.
Yeah. And trying to predict the future. We don't know what that data is going to be used or weaponized or monetized with or against you in the future. And so we definitely need more people thinking about how to structure that in order to protect everybody in a national security sense.
I agree.
So Philip, you and Cyndi actually got to visit. I won't go into I want to cover it. It was one of our armed services, right? You got to meet with somebody they were so worried about. Well, worry is probably the wrong. Concerned about just the how do we get more cyber people into the military, because once they're good, they up and leave.
That's right.
Or it takes them the amount of time to train them to where they want to be, where their time is up, and then they leave. And so we need to drive that into the lower echelon of the education system.
Has to begin almost at grade 1.
Right. So the school systems are doing that, but are there things you're working on now that could help create a more cyber ready workforce?
There is. And, Ron, we had a big push and we had a partner that it may work out in the long run to do a virtual cyber education platform. And I still believe that has a hope. But at the moment, it's sidelined, partially because of COVID and partially because of other circumstances. So what I had to do was to look at the marketplace and find a resource that would be able to build a national capability for cyber education, and it would do it in a cost-effective way. So I was fortunate enough to run into the founders of Zollege.com, Zollege. And Zollege have built a technical school training platform, and they have replicated that platform with independence and creativity, but supporting it with a strong back room. So that a lot of the sort of ugly jobs are taken away from the teachers, and they have 150 campuses now. And that business, the founders of that business recently sold the majority of that to a private equity firm who are going to go ahead and build it. They have focused on training dentists, technicians, and more, administrative people within the dental field, and medical assistants and so on. So we are currently working with a tremendous team, which you're involved with, of course. And our plan is to have many campuses, and we are currently interested in finding partners across the nation who can either join us or we may acquire. And, I'm really proud to say that Tom Innes and Gabe and his team are working literally as we speak today. I was on the phone with them. They're based in Austin, Texas, and they see this as a good business opportunity, but their primary driving factor is that this is a mission for them to serve the nation. And I'm very proud to be part of that.
I think that's excellent. I know it's a little premature to announce the company name and stuff like that, but I think it's good to know that you're continuing to work on that.
Very hard.
We're very aligned because, we support Empower, we support Year Up, we support a lot of these different training companies. We're also investors in Cybrary, which is doing that. It's all working on that same thing. But the same way we were talking about different types of people, air, water, people learn different ways.
They do.
And especially cyber is all about trust. And I think education has certainly said a lot of education is local. When you're local, you talk the same language, you understand where people come from. So having a national program is great, but bringing and delivering it locally is very important. And I think that's sometimes where people miss a little bit of the education piece, is that ultimately it is local, very personal, and it's about trust.
Yeah, and in our model, all of the assets that join us we will focus on their local capabilities. We will also provide them with access to a single national curriculum, but they'll have choices on that curriculum. There'll be a variety of them depending on what they want to focus on. If they've been in introductory cyber, then it will be in that. But if they've got a great platform already, our goal is to take the best and to leverage it through their training platforms that they've got and to be able to share it across the nation. So that's what we're looking for, the best practices. And what's been very inspiring, Ron and Cyndi, is that I've been involved in probably more than a dozen phone calls with companies over the last several weeks as we're beginning to get ready to roll out. And as we explain our mission, the commitment from the companies that we've spoken to is tremendous, and they want to be part of this. They see the issue. So, and
there's a lot of work to do yet to get these people trained in it, but there's a lot of work that's been done, right? So like the
tremendous amount of work that's been done.
Go ahead, help me.
Cyber education.
This is one of the tricks I use to get everybody to participate, right? So
a lot of acronyms,
and it is intimidating for people who are outside.
It is very intimidating.
Come in, but NICE has got a great set of doctrine and content that can use from K through 12.
Fabulous.
You can build it, but that's just having that content doesn't get somebody like the difference between them and like a Cybrary, where you've got 3 million people kind of trained in that is something. What you're working on, the in-person, again, it's going to appeal to a different type of person to get in this business.
And it's very purposeful. There has to be an invitation. There needs to be an outreach. You need to be very, very direct and inviting people in, because a lot of people feel like they're not part of the community and need a direct invitation.
Yeah, well, one of the things that in our platform, we're going to try and keep it as cost effective as possible. And that's what Tom really wanted to achieve. He was a dentist who couldn't get dental technicians. So he created his own school, and then it became a very large business, and he loved it so much. And we're going to ensure that it's cost effective. We're also going to keep the curriculum so it's very user based, and also have connectivity. So in Zollege, you didn't just get an education, but as you left, you got a job. And our connectivity to the networks, both large and small companies, we intend to buy firms that will have service capabilities too, and education, and map all of that together.
Yeah, I think one of the best things that the cyber community has woken up to is that we need apprenticeships.
Definitely.
That it's not just about the learning and the knowing and the certificate. It is about the doing and about actually touching the keyboard and actually making mistakes and being okay with that and seeking more information and education. And so apprenticeships but it's really been somewhat new that
Very new.
The industry, because the industry was starting to say what's coming out of the universities and out of college is not applicable. And so then the question, well, then why, how, what can we do? And apprenticeships and things like that have really been gaining steam, which has been great.
Are there any inspirations in the local sort of Baltimore area at the high school level of people who've got great, either extracurricular or in-curricular cyber teaching?
Gosh, and his name's gone from my the chap with Loyola Blakefield,
Steve
Morrill.
Yeah.
His story. We were put in touch by an old friend of mine. I heard several years ago he had started this, and then I reached out to Captain Tim Holden, God rest his soul, and to ask Tim if he'd come down and speak at the school. Tim was the head of training at the Navy SEALs before he retired and tragically then died in a terrible accident. But Tim and I would go over there and work with Steve, and it was so inspiring to see these young men. Now, the most inspiring for me from this standpoint, candidly, is the Gula Tech Foundation and what you're doing to connect with people who need help to get their platforms more noticed, more outgoing, more outreach. And of course, you know who they are. So these groups that we had and are going to come on WeDram coming up are really great.
We appreciate you helping us out. There's so many great organizations out there, and we wanted to kind of run it like the same way we do our cyber investing, almost like a competition, so that people had to really think about what they did, what problem they solved, and what resources they need. But at the end of the day, the ultimate decision to do these investing rests with our board. So we appreciate you helping us out and giving your input to that. We haven't announced our third grant. We're probably going to announce one in the fall. We're kind of letting the world come out of COVID, and we're trying to focus.
That's a good idea.
We're kind of trying to focus on our previous two grants, and networking, trying to get them into something like the WeDram.
Good.
That's
well, they've been invited and they're going to able to come.
That's definitely one of the things we're looking at. So when you think about military people getting out and going into the commercial world, is there a role for that? Should the government be doing more to encourage people who did cyber, whether it's offense and defense, to go do it for a bank or a university?
Well, I think the military discipline and the mission-orientated focus that veterans bring is tremendously powerful, whatever field they go into. And that's certainly been my experience. I didn't serve in the U.S. military. I went to a military school in Britain, very different, but the same sort of training, and was very fortunate. So when people come into leave the military and they have those skill sets, we certainly need to use them as much as possible.
And we have some great examples in our circle of friends, right? Yep. So we'll just drop them in so we can put them in the notes. Like sure. John Brickey left the Army.
Absolutely.
Went to MasterCard.
He did.
Doing some amazing things. They're actually working on some of these training problems, right? JC Vega, right?
Yep.
Not only, served in the Army, went to IBM, helped do tremendous work. Now he's over at Devo.
Was he a helicopter pilot, maybe?
That's right.
He was a helicopter pilot.
That's right. We can do that and drink there. We got Matt Dunlop. Who literally came
CISO at Under Armour.
Directly into a CISO job at Under Armour. And so there's some really good examples of that. And I think everybody in the industry who has those relationships, we work with people like the Commit Foundation, to try to get people to kind of do this transition, from military to civilian. But there's not enough.
No, there's not
enough. And I think as an industry, we don't do enough talking about what we do and what that means. And therefore, the inspire piece is so difficult to get across.
Well, if you go to a cyber security event or convention, the people who attend them are so excited when they're there that they forget that they need to be excited when they're outside talking to the public too. And we're terribly bad at telling our story. And if we need to do a much, much better job, but the government too needs to do a better job. I think the government has failed to properly communicate just the vital nature of cyber. You know, we get these blips where we have a big issue, and then it just, the next thing you know, it's forgotten. We get another blip. But, you know, Sean Henry over there at CrowdStrike says there's never going to be a cyber Pearl Harbor. It's going to be the death by the thousand cuts. I think he was the first person I ever heard say that. And I think he's exactly right. And it's certainly the plan of our enemies. So
speaking of plans of enemies, and of course, it's the Gula Tech Cyber Fiction show.
Okay.
What do you think of books like Ghost Fleet or the new 2034?
I don't know about 2034. I do know about Ghost Fleet. I mean, these are, you know, so what do I think of those books? I think what you need to do is go back in time to H.G. Wells and to Star Trek and these and say, this is what they wrote about and this is what we become. Now, we don't have time travel yet, but my goodness, look what's been developed during that time period. You know, H.G. Wells and the chap who wrote the Tarzan books also wrote the Princess of Mars series, all of these things. And they're largely coming true. So I think that we probably have some of these technologies. We just aren't talking very loudly about them at the moment.
So it's kind of the UFO section of the show.
Well, it's kind of like instead of saying cyber fiction, it's cyber prediction.
Yeah. I you know, I've always believed that we were on a very precipice of being able to create a system where information sharing would force multiply our knowledge in an unbelievable scale. And I think we are right there. We haven't quite achieved it yet. It's possible that quantum computing might make that happen if we can get it under control. We're on the edge of huge advancements. And I think that we're sort of, if you look at where the world was in 1880 and then where it was by 1950, and I think that that gap in time is going to be shorter this time, but I think we're in the equivalent of 1880, and in the next 10 years we're going to get to 1950 in advancements. I believe it's
amazing how much we repeat. I really feel like we're in the roaring 20s right now, coming out of the Great Depression, the Great COVID. So where can people find you? You said you're on LinkedIn.
On LinkedIn, welcome to Connect with Purpose.
Excellent.
Coordinate is I live by. Lafayette said it. Why not?
That's excellent. And if people want to engage you for a Path Builder class, is that more of a corporate engagement with WTP?
Happy to have them reach out to me directly.
Awesome. Well, Philip, thank you for your service to the country. Thank you for your
minor services.
Your involvement with our foundation. Thank you.
Yes. Well, we all serve, and getting more people talking is better.
Can I make a small plug?
Of course.
The Solarium Commission's done great things. I'm really inspired by what Chris Inglis is going to do as the National Cyber Director. I think he's exactly the person in that role. And it's our privilege, and Ron, you're going to be on the panel, to host a Solarium Commission event partnered with Dreamcourt, the University of Baltimore, the National Cryptologic Museum and Cyber Centers of Excellence there, with Mark Lepke, Diane Janicek, Rear Admiral Mark Montgomery, the Executive Director of the Solarium Commission, and also Samantha Ratovich, Dr. Samantha Ratovich, will all be appearing June 23rd. I'll be the host, and one of my colleagues, David Panzer, is going to actually do the moderating, and we're going to discuss what has been done in the Solarium Commission regarding education. So what has been accomplished? What are the hard things that have changed? They laid out certain guidelines they wanted to accomplish, and we're going to discuss what they've accomplished and also what needs to be done. And that's June 23rd, 2 p.m. It'll be online and everybody can sign up for it.
That's 2021. So if anybody's watching into the future, we'll see how much cyber prediction we have been able to do here.
Yeah.
But we'll also put an invite to that in the show notes.
Perfect.
Philip, thank you very much. This is Ron and Cyndi Gula signing out with another episode of Gula Tech Cyber Fiction.
Thank you very much.
Great to have you.